In this video, we're going to talk about the last few slides of Animals Part 1 and then the entire slide of Animals Part 2. So where we left off yesterday in class was differentiation of germ layers. There are three germ layers: endoderm, mesoderm, and ectoderm. Endoderm is the innermost layer, and if you think about what's really inside a human body, there is the lining of digestive tract and the respiratory system right here. Mesoderm is in the middle between the inside and what's on the most outside. So there are layers of muscles, there are layers of the circulatory system, that's your bloodstream, and there's also the reproductive system and the excretory organ system. So the excretory system is how you form urine and get rid of all the waste in your body. The last one is ectoderm. Ecto means outside, and ectoderm is the outside layer of your body. So what you have is the sense organs, how you can sense how hot it is outside, whether there's someone poking you, is there a spider on your leg, and you have neurons connected to those sense organs and sending that signal throughout your body and to your brain in order for you to respond to the environment. If there's a spider on your leg, your brain will know that there's a spider and you will get rid of it. And the skin. So here's a picture showing you the three germ layers. The germ layers started off as a ball of cells that are not that differentiated, but they already have a certain position within the ball of cell, right? You see here, there's this part of the cell, this part, and then the outer part, and all of those eventually with the specific position is going to turn into a certain part of your body. This outer part is going to become the outer part of your body, the skin. The mesoderm in the middle, right, same thing, is going to be developed into organs, and then the endoderm was on the most inside. It's going to be the inner lining of the organs, your respiratory tract, for example. This one is body cavities. Body cavities is filled with fluid, and this fluid is within your digestive tract. So what happens is that your stomach is kind of like a floating balloon, but it's floating in your body cavity with your body liquid around it. This next one is patterns of embryological development. So as we said, as you start off as one single fertilized egg, this one zygote right here, is going to divide through mitosis into a ball of cell. And this ball of cell can't just stay as a ball of cell, otherwise you can't have all the different types of body shapes of animals. So how do you actually get an animal, a full entire animal? This happens. So if you imagine a balloon, and you poke your finger onto the bottom of the balloon, then the bottom of the balloon is going to cave into the inside of the balloon a little bit. And this is kind of how a blastopore is produced. Blastopore. So a blastopore for something called a protostome is going to turn into the mouth. So this little opening, this little caving in, is going to turn into the mouth. And this happens for most invertebrates. Remember, invertebrates do not have a backbone. It does not have a vertebrae. For deuterostomes, for example, human, this little initial caving in of the ball of cell eventually becomes the anus. So this is deuterostomes. Remember, human beings are deuterostomes. Okay? Here's another picture showing you how this works. You have cells dividing, and then the blastopore becomes the mouse. That will be a protostome, or most invertebrates. And then the blastopore becoming an anus will be most vertebrates. As an organism is developing, something else happens, such as segmentation, where the body is separated kind of into different segments of the body. So for a spider, you have all those legs, different part of the body. For you, there's your arms and legs. So those are all segments of your body. Cephalization is also something that happens during the development of an embryo, the obtaining of a head. So you start as a cell, right? You can't really tell where's where, but by say 9-10 week, you can already tell where about the head is going to be, and then you get a head. And that head is going to be full of neurons and be able to allow you to do a lot of physiological activities. There's also the limb formation during embryological development. So right here, you can see that arms, there's this little bud right here. You're forming an arm on one side, on the other side. Those are limbs. For fish, it's going to be flippers, and then you can have wings if you were to be a bird. So here are all of the features of an animal body plan, levels of organization, right? The different layers of your body, different differentiation of germ layers. So as your initial ball of cell is developing, there are different layers of it that will turn into different part of your body. Formation of body cavities, that's your stomach floating in your body cavity. And then patterns of embryological development, there are different patterns. Segmentation, cephalization, limb formation. Oops. The last one is a cladogram of animals. Animal phyla are usually defined by, according to adult body plans and the embryological development. So right here is an example of a cladogram, and you can see all those things happening. So multicellularity happened before any of the animals appeared. So the common ancestor of all animals was a multicellular organism. And then here are other different developments. Segmentations happen at two different places over here. A backbone happened right here. Segmentation also happened here. So you can just take a look at it, and I will not ask you when a backbone showed up, but you might see this cladogram again. And now we can move on to Animals Part 2. Animals Part 2, starting the first one, the Cambrian Explosion. I'm not going to ask you the exact years of when Cambrian Explosion happened, but you should kind of have a sense of when it happens. So it was between 530 and 515 million years ago, a long time ago. So what exactly is a Cambrian Explosion? It's kind of an explosion of evolution, where a lot of new organisms, new species of especially animals showed up during that time, during this relatively short time, even though it's 15 million years of time. But in the evolutionary history, it's not actually that long, especially for how many different modern multicellular phyla. Remember, phylum is under kingdom. All of those appeared for the first time. So what are some other things that happened during that time? Multicellular organisms actually didn't evolve until 3 billion years after the first prokaryotic cell appeared. So it takes that long to go from one cell to multiple cells. And when did the first prokaryotic cell appear? That was 3.5 billion years ago. So here you have a picture of some multicellular embryo from the fossil. Okay, so here's the evidence. When you find these fossils of eggs and embryo, you know that, however old this fossil is, something produced these eggs and embryos. Let's see. However, the first animal began evolving before the Cambrian Explosion, even though the Cambrian Explosion really allowed the diversified the animal population. Early animals were okay, so here's why it's hard to find some of the earliest types of animal fossils, because they were originally the earlier types of animals were tiny and soft-bodied, so they don't really form fossils because there's no exoskeleton. They just, if you have a jellyfish, most of that jellyfish is going to be gone by the time fossils can form. So that's a difficulty for us to really track the history of animals. So the two major Cambrian fossil sites are, just for your knowledge, there's one in China and there's one in Canada. It just so happened that those areas had a lot of fossils of those very ancient organisms. But what else happened during Cambrian Explosion? Animals with specialized cells, so cells that can do different jobs. Let's say cells that can be eyes, act as eyes, cells that can be a part of the flipper, that kind of things. There are also different tissues and organs that came about after that, just natural. The next one is body symmetry. Remember, let's see. this guy will be a bilateral organism, right? So body symmetry showed up within that period of time. Segmentation, you can see that in this picture as well, a front and a back end. So a front end we'll call that an anterior, right here will be an anterior end of an animal, and then there's the posterior end of an animal and appendages. So here we have a cladogram of non-chordate invertebrates. So they are invertebrates, first off, so they don't have a backbone, and they're non-chordate, so they don't have the notochord, they don't have a nerve cord, that kind of thing. So this says non-chordate invertebrates do not form a clade. Remember, if you have the common ancestor and all of the descendants, that's a clade. But over here, since the chordates are right here, these are not a clade. But you can just take a look at this cladogram for a few seconds and see what's on here. Sponges, we got, these are jellyfish, arthropods, roundworms, flatworms, annelid, mollusk, echinoderm. Okay? So here we have a cladogram of actual chordates. So that's where this little branch become all of these branches. And you can take a look at this. We have what do we have here? We have all kinds of fish. We have some frogs, turtles, crocodile, mammals, birds. Anyway, so here in these two pictures, you can read these on your own once you get the notes, or just right now, pause the video. This shows you how the fish flippers allowed them to become eventually kind of hand-like. So these, as you can see, these fish bones in the flippers originally were not very big, so they could not support the fish body and they could not walk on land. However, during evolution, eventually the bones changed its structure enough that they can kind of act as a hand as an appendage, and then the bones are strong enough, the structure is strong enough to allow them to crawl on land. And that's when you first have your amphibians. But before that, let's first talk about fish. So fish has fins, scales, and gills, and for those characteristics, you can just imagine a fish when you're taking a test. If you were to be asked about fish, what are some common characteristics that a fish has? But over here is kind of interesting. How does a fish use its gill, and why do we not have a gill? A gill is really important for fish because it allows the fish to breathe in water. But what exactly is it getting out of the water? It's getting it's getting oxygen from the water. Where does the water get the oxygen? They get it from the atmosphere. So when water flows into the mouth, when a fish is drinking water all the time, and you see the fish opening and closing its mouth all the time, and that's the fish trying to breathe. And as the fish opening its mouth, the water flows into the mouth, and then it'll come back out through the gill, and you see all those flaps and tiny hair-like parts of the gill. That allows a lot of surface area to allow the oxygen to diffuse into the gill and then be sent throughout the fish body. And this mechanism doesn't work because without the gill opening, with the operculum opening and closing and allowing the water to be filtered through, they can't get any oxygen. That's why fish cannot breathe on land, because they can only breathe in oxygen that's already diffused in water. The next one is amphibians. Amphibians develop lungs to allow breathing. And not only that, so right here, they have a lung to breathe, right? Because the gill doesn't work on land. So it has to, through evolution, obtain the ability to breathe on land. But very interestingly, amphibians also have a moist skin with mucus glands right here, which allows their skin to breathe water and breathing oxygen from the water as well, or even in the air. So the moist skin, so if you imagine yourself breathing with your skin, that's kind of weird, but that's what amphibian does. And they don't have scales and they don't have claws. Next one is reptiles. Reptiles have dry, scaly skin. So if you think about a lizard or crocodiles, they have dry, scaly skin. And they have a very well-developed lungs because they have to potentially a lot of times be away from water, but they still have to breathe. They can only develop, they can only rely on the lungs. So they have to have a very well-developed lungs. And then they have very strong lips to allow them to crawl on land. They have shelled eggs. So before reptiles, for the amphibian and fish, they have to have eggs being submerged in water in order for the egg to survive. So if you think about an egg, it's all kind of watery, right? However, in order for the entire organism, the entire species to survive on land, the egg itself also needs protection from losing too much water. So the shell allows all the water and the embryo itself to be protected within the shell, which is great for reptiles. And there are 4 groups of reptiles. There's lizard and snake, crocodiles, turtles, and tortoise, and the tuatara. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, actually. Sorry. This next one is birds. Birds are ectotherm. You need to know the word ectotherm. Ectotherm means a bird cannot depend on the environment for its body temperature. So that's why you see a lizard have to be outside and getting the sun during the day and raise their body temperature to allow all of the activities of the cells, because it needs a certain temperature in order to survive. And for birds and for humans, for example, all the mammals and birds, we are ectotherms. We can maintain our own body temperature. And for birds, they also have feathers. The next one is mammals are also ectotherms. Mammals can produce milk, and they have hair. Mammals breathe air and have 4-chambered hearts. Okay, a very well-developed heart and lung. Last one, all primates have long fingers and toes with nails instead of claws, arms that can rotate around, shoulder joints, a strong clavicle, binocular vision, and a well-developed cerebrum. So if you fingers and toes with nails, pretty easy instead of claws. Arms that can rotate around the shoulder joint. So if you can rotate your arm right now, it can go in many directions. But for a bird, it can only go up and down. For a fish, it can only go kind of forward and backward. It can't go in all directions. Plus, they don't have a shoulder joint. A strong clavicle, binocular vision, with 2 eyes. You can put the 2 images together and then see things in 3D. And the well-developed cerebrum, that's the front of your head that allows a lot of human activities. So here it is, animals. They're amazing.